JohnnyT-shirt.com. Welcome into another edition of Inside Carolina's Game Plan Podcast. I try to keep it rolling for 15 or 16 seconds. I cannot do it. That's Greg Barnes. That's Jason Staples. We are sponsored by, indeed, Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-shirt.com, and Congruity. I am Tommy Ashley. Let's roll with this. Jason, I'll get you in here first. Greg, I think we need to give some flowers to Jason Staples because it appears that once upon a time that Jason Staples said that Jacoby Criswell might be the best quarterback not named Drake or Sam on this roster over the years, and here we are. We are entering perhaps the Jacoby Criswell portion of the program and portion of the season. Jason, I thought he looked pretty good on Saturday. There was some things he left on the table, as do most unseasoned quarterbacks, to go with the food reference. But your thoughts here on Criswell and what he may bring to the table for this team?
Yeah, I think fans would be surprised by how many plays are left on the field every week when you actually go into the film room and watch. Football's a hard game, y'all, especially at the quarterback position. But that what he did in his real first extended action this season, especially as a guy who'd been repping with the threes, I thought he played well. I mean, going back and looking at it again, I mean, my film room session went through a couple things, but I just thought as a whole he had a calming influence on the offense, and he didn't try to do too much, and that's one of the sort of most impressive things. He's trying to win a job, obviously, but he came in and just ran the offense and got the football in other people's hands, and just looked calm. And it was one of those things. I actually didn't know initially that it was him when he, the first couple snaps that he was in the game, but it's like, wow, Harrell looks a little calmer at the moment. And then it was like, oh wait, no, that's Jacoby. And it was that noticeable to me. And some of that's just experience. He's an older guy, and the confidence is there on some of this. But the other thing is that he can spin it, as we've all known, and that also helps. He made some routine throws that should be routine for a good quarterback. He made look routine. When you're making a quick out throw on third down, and you got to put it in there, if you locate it in the right spot, it's first down, and it's an easy first down. And he did exactly that. You make the routine look routine, and it helps offenses immensely. Anything more than that, and you've got a star. But a good quarterback makes routine stuff look routine, and he did for the most part in this game.
Greg, we've been doing it. You've been covering Carolina forever. I've been watching forever. We know what bad quarterback play looks like. We've seen that in years past. We know what borderline elite quarterback play looks like. But it feels like for this team, this specific North Carolina team, they need Jacoby Criswell to do what Jason just talked about. Do the routine with an occasional splash play and just move forward, because you've got a defense that's showing they can play. You've got a running game that's showing it can be successful. It seems simple, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, this is what we've been talking about all offseason, is there is no Drake May or Sam Howell to lean on. So you've got a really good running back. The defense has got to be a little bit better. And, I mean, granted, we're not going to know, I think, for another week or two if the defense is legit. But so far, so good. And it was really a matter of having a quarterback in place who looked functional. And as you said, we've seen bad quarterback play. But take care of the ball, hit some easy throws, know when to throw it away, know when to punt the ball. Yeah, it sounds easy, right? I mean, it sounds like high school type stuff. It's not. As Jason said, it's a very difficult game, and especially a very difficult position. I think really one of the more interesting things is the fact that I mean, we're talking about week 4, and North Carolina's focused on their third quarterback. One of the interesting things is, Criswell's been around for a long time, yet I was trying to pull up the stat here. If you look at like his total number of snaps, Connor Harrell has played 199. Criswell's played 267 in his career. And he's been around a lot longer than
Harrell. He's thrown like 59 balls or something like that, 59 or 60 passes, something ridiculously low.
Yeah. So while he is experienced age-wise, he's an old dude. Game-wise, he really isn't. And that's one of the things is you look at the competition that he's played, we really don't know what he can do against good teams. And as we'll talk about tonight, I'm not sure that we're going to find that out on Saturday. But I did want to ask Jason, very interesting to me when all the conversation kind of in training camp was Criswell's not there. It's really between Connor and Max, and it wasn't long in the camp where it became pretty clear that Max was the guy, and just assumed that was going to be Connor as the backup. Connor is the backup, and after a game and a half, he gets yanked, and now Criswell's in. Like, why did that process play out the way it did? I mean, if Criswell's going to be the guy on Saturday, and I know Connor's supposed to get some snaps, but how do you go from Connor being the guy to like a week or two later, well, he's really not the guy anymore? How does that transpire?
So I think part of it is that when we went to the open practices, Criswell, we've known for a long time that Criswell has a ton of arm talent. I mean, he's flashed that in practice in the past. He's been really good in Chapel Hill in practice before. But when we went to the open practices, you watched him missing the same throws I did. And you watched him look rusty. I mean, he looked rusty at times in those initial open practices in camp. And we talked about it. I mean, Tommy, you and I were when at the end of summer, before camp, you and I were talking about, how many games is Criswell going to start this year? Because I felt like he was the most talented of the bunch in terms of, what he could potentially bring to the table. But it's a big disadvantage not to have the spring. So the question was, like, is he going to get the chance? And we talked about the possibility of injury, other things. And if he got that chance, he probably would make something of it. Then we got to watch him in camp, and it was like, he looks like he hasn't thrown in a while. The accuracy is not where it should be. Missing some things that should be routine. Still, putting velocity on it, and and spinning it like he always has, but just not as consistent. And the other two were showing that they knew the offense better, and they were locating the football a little bit better. Now, at the same time, you remember we had that conversation at the end of the second practice where I said, well, he's missing more throws than the other two, but he also has made more wow throws than the other two combined. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, that was the thing. Like, he made a couple throws in that open period where it's like, whoa. All right, like, that's why that guy, has a high ceiling. The question was going to be whether he actually started to put it together. And what's apparent to me is that once Max went down and he lost some of the weight that he showed early in camp. I mean, that's a factor when you're heavier than you should be and heavier than you've been when you've thrown before. That affects you. It appears to me that he started to put pressure on and started to flash what he's able to do. And the other thing is that, frankly, Harrell has not looked comfortable when he's been in there. He's, the game, we talked about this before last week. The game looks like it's moving really fast for him. So then at that point, you've got to ask yourself, if you're the coordinator and you're the head coach, okay, the game looks like it's moving really fast for him. And there've been a couple throws that probably should have been picked. There've been a couple of decisions that we're looking at and going, okay, we got to make sure we clean this up before the schedule gets rougher. And then you start to, I've been in these rooms on the other side of this. You start to ask, like, do we need to look at what the other guy's got? He's had a couple good days. And then he goes in and looks like he did in that game when he gets his, third drive of the game or whatever, and fourth drive of the game, and things look settled, and all of a sudden things look routine on some stuff, and you go, that guy might be our guy. That's how that happens. But yeah, he did not look like he was on the same tier even as Connor 2 weeks into camp. He just looked like he was still scraping off some rust. But we knew that the potential was there. It was just a matter of how quickly could he get there, and would he have a chance to really show it if the other guys stayed healthy.
So the interesting thing to me is I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but if what you just said is accurate, and that's exactly how it played out. It seems to me like Criswell is the guy the rest of the way, because Connor had his shot and showed that he's probably not ready. And if they made the decision that, hey, in camp, Criswell was rusty, but now he's kind of caught up, well, how do you continue to polish? You give him more reps, not just in practice, but in games. And obviously a lot can happen, but just if that's exactly how things played out, then I would imagine that Criswell's got to be in the catbird seat moving forward.
I would be honestly very surprised for a couple reasons, but one of them, if you watched this last week's game, you watched the last 2 weeks, I would be very surprised if Criswell was not in the driver's seat to basically be the guy moving forward. Now, that doesn't cement it. He still had at least one turnover-worthy throw in that game that I remember, going through and going, But Harrell had one that, I think it was the last throw he made in that game where it's like, whoa, you cannot, oh my gosh, you cannot misidentify that and throw that into that backer. Like that it absolutely should have been a pick. But, Criswell has to go out and play well enough to demonstrate that he's going to be a consistent option, that he can actually handle the job. But outside of him going out and flaming out and just throwing multiple interceptions and, making a bunch of bad decisions, that sort of thing, I would be surprised if he's not really the guy going forward. You still give Harrell his opportunity to go out and show progress and compete for the job. But again, just looking at what I've seen, I would expect I would expect Criswell to be the guy moving forward.
Yeah, and it's a great story. People in the chat have said if he never transfers and sits behind Drake for a second year, he's the clear-cut starter now. And folks talk about misevaluation of the QB room. I've heard some people talk about quarterback recruiting for North Carolina. Let's think about what the past two quarterbacks were before now. But Criswell is a guy who needs – it reminds me of my golf game, Greg, and I've played with you. I can hit a great shot. Greg Barnes is like, man, that was elite. And I can follow it up with, let's say, less than elite play right after that. And that's how Criswell, that practice we saw, Jason, that you referenced, that throw, I think he threw it. I can't remember who it was. It was one of the younger receivers. It was in the corner over there. It was just like a dime.
Unreal throw. And off his back foot with pressure in the 11-on-11 period. And it was one of those, there's only a limited number of NFL quarterbacks that make that throw.
Yeah. And so he's doing that with, at the time, extra weight with a ton of rust. So I think the more he gets to play, and folks forget, this guy was a high-level recruit coming out of high school, and, it's still in there, just got to get it out of him. So it'll be interesting to watch that aspect against James Madison. I guess the question is, Greg, and you said this, and this can apply to the entire offense. We know Hampton's going to be Hampton regardless of the competition, but for the offensive line, for the receivers, for Criswell at the quarterback position, how much of a test is James Madison going to be, and how difficult is it to even know that, given the way this team's totally been overhauled and rebranded with a new head coach? Everybody's going to look at the first two games that they played and said, well, they have not been good. But how many times have we seen that story play out, especially early in the season? How does this offense go against James Madison to show you growth across the board, not just from Criswell?
Well, let's talk about JMU just a little bit. So they had 55 players depart the program in the offseason, and they brought in 64 new guys. And then, of course, they brought in a brand new coaching staff. So it is a completely different look than what they've been the last couple years. That being said, when you talk about what they bring to the table defensively to be able to challenge Criswell, so far it's been pretty good results. I mean, this is a unit that is allowing 6.5 points a game. Granted, they played Charlotte and Gardner Webb, so we can't take too much out of that. But they've been very good, and they've allowed 240 yards, and they've been pretty good against the pass. So I think this will be another step forward. This is not Minnesota, of course, in terms of defensive capabilities, but certainly a step up from Charlotte and North Carolina Central. And look, this is it, guys. I mean, the good thing about non-conference play, the way North Carolina has the schedule set up, is that you get a lot of work in September to get ready for conference play. The bad part is you get all 4 of your non-conference games out of the picture 4 weeks in. So you have no breaks along the way to rest some injuries and get some other guys playing time. I mean, you're straight into ACC play next week at Duke. And, this is an opportunity for the offense to say, okay, well, we've got the quarterback now. This is number 3, but we think he's the guy, to be able to show that against what appears to be a relatively decent defense, that you can be effective because Duke's solid defensively. And I think most of the ACC, as we'll get to see, is while there's probably not many great teams, there's some pretty solid teams. There's not really a bottom, at least compared to what we've seen in recent years. And so I think it's an important game offensively for Chip Lindsey to kind of show that, hey, we know what we've got with Hampton. This is an opportunity to really get Criswell up to speed, really have that 1-2 combination of balance, run, pass, and be able to put pressure on the opposing defense and then let North Carolina's defense do its part and have some success. And I think this is their last time to get out there and to be able to put it together before ACC play starts.
Jason, and we're talking with Jason Staples and Greg Barnes here on the Inside Carolina Game Plan. Jason, how much do you show this week? If you're North Carolina, if you're Chip Lindsey, I mean, you got to get Criswell comfortable doing things. You need to get some of the older wide receivers who now have an older quarterback out there that they have some chemistry with, albeit a year ago out there. So you need to get these guys in. Folks are asking about the injured players in the chat. We'll see how that all shakes out shortly before game time. I think Banfield was questionable right up to game time last week, so I expect we might see him. Rucker had Rucker probably not, and I don't think you risk playing guys that aren't ready against James Madison. But Jason, how much does the offense show this week? I feel like they have not shown a ton thus far. Is it time to sort of open it up to see, like we talked last week or 2 weeks ago, about let Connor Harrell see what he can do? Are we at that point with Criswell here against James Madison?
I think you've got to – you don't have a whole lot of runway left to find out what he's most comfortable with under the lights. So you definitely run through what you think of as your base. So you're going to see some mesh, you're going to see some snag, you're going to see some four verts. But you're going to have to find out what he's really capable of on that. And so I don't think you're coming into this game with the aim to hide a whole lot. I think you're trying to throw some stuff at him and see, okay, we know from last week that you could do this, but what about this look? How do you handle this? I think you also have him do some of the some of the check stuff that you put a little bit more of that on him this week and find out what can he do? How much can he get you into and out of the right, play direction, all of that. I think you put everything on him because you want to know going in, and you really don't know with him as much as you do with the other two that you had in the fall, in the spring. This is your opportunity to find out what he's comfortable with. And so I don't think you do a bunch of tendency breakers. I don't think you do a bunch of, trick plays or whatever, but I think the whole offense is in.
Greg, you agree with that? Muted. Been waiting to say it all year.
Hey. See, I got through the first 3 weeks with no issues. Yeah, I do agree with that. I think that's the right approach. I mean, like I said, it's go time, and I think you need to be solid in your base, and hopefully this is a game you don't have to go to your bag of tricks. I don't think that's certainly something that you plan for, although you do work on that in practice, just to have if you need it. And that's pretty much what you have is you got to get out there and you got to perform. And this is a game where if you take care of business and do all the little things right, I think you win rather handily. And that's what they need. They need to see a performance where the coaching staff and the fan base and say, okay, that's kind of what we thought this team could be. Now we're ready for ACC play.
I'm going to hold you to that prediction later. We're going to find out if you believe they do everything right when we get to that portion. Jason, let me ask you one more thing about the offense. I think this is a relevant comment, and it's the wide receivers. I mean, for me watching, my untrained eye, I see a lot of young guys, if not making plays, at least getting open and having the opportunity to make plays. Christian Hamilton comes to mind. I mean, sitting way up high on Saturday, he seems like a guy that's open about every time. Your thoughts on this position specifically? The tight ends, obviously Criswell's comfortable with those guys, with Copenhaver and Nesbitt, and made some good throws to him. But are we in a worry stage about these wide receivers, specifically the older guys, not getting it done, not getting open, for lack of a better way of putting it?
I want to see another game where there's a little bit more consistency under center. One of the things that can change how much separation it looks like a receiver's getting is how quickly the quarterback gets the ball out and whether he throws them open. So, and I mean, I think a good example of this is actually Keon Coleman from last year. He going into the NFL draft, there were questions about how much separation he created, but to my eye, he created more separation than people realize, especially when he's healthy early in the year last year. But they didn't get the ball to him on time enough, or in the right location, throwing him open in ways that were maximizing that space. And then all of a sudden, with the Bills, through first 2 weeks, people were going, wow, he's getting more separation than we thought. Quarterback really can change things on that. I'm curious to see what happens with Criswell getting a little bit more burn this week, to see if suddenly it looks like guys are a little more open.
Yeah, it'll be something to watch. Just yet another thing to watch when you're watching. Wide receivers can't throw it to themselves, but they got to catch it when it comes to them. And we've seen too many drops thus far this season. I do like I've been on the ship train forever, and Christian Hamilton has certainly played his rear end off as well. And if you go back and watch that film, you see that he's out there a few times. Greg, anything left on the offensive side of the ball? I think it's a work in progress with injuries. Austin Blasky out. We'll see if he can get some burn and get some run here before Duke game and before ACC starts. Banfield needs to get back in there. So it's always a question mark of chemistry and all that. But offense, Greg, anything left?
Look, I feel like we've been talking about the same thing for weeks now, or for months now, really. But this is a game of trench warfare, right? And the key part for North Carolina, as we've highlighted before, is offensive line play. And as you mentioned, there have been some injuries. We know what Omarion Hampton can do. He's a great runner. He's got good speed, and he is difficult to bring down. If you're trying to arm tackle him, good luck. And we also know that Criswell, while he's got experience, he hasn't thrown a whole lot in games, and he's still kind of getting back into his groove. So what do those two things mean? If the offensive line comes to play, not just Saturday, but in the weeks to come, well, now all of a sudden, Omarion Hampton's got some room to work, and he can break tackles. That's a pretty nice idea, right? And then if Criswell can actually have some time and not have to move around and not have to think too much and be rushed, well, likelihood he's going to be able to work into the game a little bit easier. And that makes everything better for everybody, including the defense. And so I really think not having an offensive line coach the last couple of weeks has probably hurt a little bit in that regard. But that's a big step forward, is if the offensive line can gel, to your point, that's going to make the offense as a whole that much better.
Talking with Greg and Jason on the game plan, I'm going to talk about Jason's favorite sponsor, Johnny T-Shirts. JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Go see them on East Franklin Street. They are I had an anecdote in my text, in my Slack chat, where one of the IC staffers, specifically Joey Powell, went to Johnny T-Shirt today, and the young lady working there said, everybody keeps coming in and says the guys on Inside Carolina say this is where we need to shop. So it's working, folks. Do your diligence in getting to Johnny T-Shirt. Support that local business with all the swag. I think the away throwbacks, the white ones, might be relevant to your interest coming down the season. So you might want to pick up one of those. Pick up any jersey, any NIL stuff. All you got. It's basketball season before you know it. Good gracious. If you're going to the casino to see a blue-white scrimmage, get you some gear at Johnny T-Shirt before you head that way. And, of course, 10% off if you're a premium subscriber. National guys pay the bills. Game plan. All right. Defense. It's Jason. That's Greg. It's game plan. It's Tommy. Jason. Are we filling the defense on Tuesday night on the soon to be renamed On the Beat? I said, is the defensive line legit? Are they legit yet, Jason? What do they got to show you Saturday going into Duke to say, hey man, these guys are legit?
To be honest, it's not about anything they're going to do Saturday. I want to see them against someone other than these first four teams first. But with every game that they've played so far, I've got less I've got less uncertainty about whether or not they're going to answer that bell when they get the chance. The question is how good can they be at that stage when they start to play against better competition? Because they are better. I don't think there's any question that they're playing better than they have in years up front. Again, we've talked about this. You go back to the FAMU game a few years ago, and what we saw up front there looks nothing like what we saw this week against a comparable level team. That in itself, apples to apples comparison, okay, well, that gives you indication that there's been a step forward. The question is really how much, and we can't know that until they play against a team that brings more to the table offensively, and, we'll find out.
Yeah, I thought they did well. They held up against Minnesota's offensive line in the first game of the season. Greg, for me, it's not really level of competition, right? We've watched enough Carolina football specifically with most of these same players, even though I think this week's cover guy, Joshua Harris, has made a gigantic difference in the room and on the field. But these guys are playing, whereas in years past against even lesser competition, they got their butt kicked. I mean, we've heard Wofford before. We saw what Wofford was able to do against most of these same guys. Older, more physically mature, but Collins and Monachino have lit the proverbial fire, it appears to me, at least from an effort and an aggression standpoint. And for me watching Carolina football as long as I have, that is a big deal for that group, Greg.
It is, for sure. And I think maybe Jason will agree with me on this. I think where in years past, this has not been a good group at all, like lower tier type stuff. I think at their floor is has risen quite a bit, which is a big step. I mean, you have to have that step take place. Are we up to a point where we can say, hey, this is above average or even good? I'm hesitant to say that either. But you have to at least elevate your floor. And I think we've seen enough, to your point, to be able to make that claim. It also helps a lot of these guys are veterans. Even last week without Rucker, you could tell some guys had played a lot of games. They looked the part, and they are experienced. I mean, you would expect the combination of age and high school potential, recruiting rankings, that they would be able to deliver at this point in time. So are they finally living up to those rankings? I think the trend line's pretty good. But I wholeheartedly agree with Jason that given what we've seen in the past, I'm not going to give that tip of the hat this early. I'm going to need to see it against a little bit better competition. And JMU, this is not a good offensive team. This is an offense that has played Charlotte and Gardner-Webb, and they looked functional for one half out of 4. So the defense can put up some really good numbers on Saturday, and I'm not sure that's going to tell us too terribly much.
Yeah, they got George Pettaway. I guarantee you this will happen on Saturday. George Pettaway will make a play, and he may go 75 yards. He may make 3 guys miss, and Carolina could win 45-10. And there will be people that say, how's George Pettaway not on Carolina's team? Why couldn't they find a role for him? That's my hot take of this game on Saturday. One thing I want to see defensive-wise, and Greg, I'll stick with you, bounce it back and forth, is from the linebackers. We know Amari Campbell has been fantastic. We know Power Echols has been Power Echols. He's the guy. He's been that way for 3 years, 4 years. But we need to see some depth. I mean, Amari Campbell's out there swinging a stick or a club because he has to play, and he would not come off the field with a broken hand, but he's got to play because there haven't been any proven guys behind him. How key is that in this run-up? Jason mentioned we're reaching the end of the runway before ACC play. How key is it to get even more depth? The defensive line's played a ton of guys. They've played 6 safeties. At corner and linebacker specifically, not so much. It's tough to play guys that aren't ready, but guys that aren't ready need to play. Greg, that's the old chicken and the egg football.
It is, and it's, as you mentioned there, it's very important to note that Jeff Collins has made it a priority, and we've seen that with some of the secondary rotations as well as up front. So that's promising, and that's what he told us he's going to do in the offseason, and we've seen it. Linebacker really is kind of the chicken or the egg type thing, and it's been an issue since Mack Brown returned. And, of course, Tommy Thigpen has been his linebackers coach that whole time. So Tommy plays a role in it too, but it is this situation of, you need to get other guys ready. But this is a position where they like to lean on their primary guys. Power's gone after this year. So you need to get some guys ready regardless. So it really is a challenging situation. And as we've talked about, you've already played your 2 worst opponents of the year, the last 2 games that you played. Those were really your opportunities. If you were trying to build depth, those were your games. And it may turn out that Saturday is kind of the same situation, although I think JMU is, considering they beat Charlotte 30-7, that alone suggests this is a more difficult opponent. It is. It's a fascinating thing. And most of the time, people wonder about this. It's not Mack Brown necessarily saying, hey, that guy needs to go in. He needs to go in on this play. I mean, Mack's got bigger things to worry about. I'll give you a good example. Back in when Carolina lost in 2015 to South Carolina, Carolina got into the red zone late, and who was not on the field? Elijah
Hood.
And after the game, Fedora didn't even know he went on the field. And people were like, oh, how does he not know that? And the whole reason is because it was it Larry Porter? Was he the running-back coach at the time?
I can't remember.
It was not Larry's responsibility to keep up with the running backs. It was the running backs coach who was trying to make sure that he split reps appropriately given who they wanted to get the most reps.
And Greg has frozen. Are you going to
and
come
that's
back?
not
Greg?
ideal. Just for filling in for Greg.
Tommy Thigpen is probably the number one guy with that.
You froze, and I don't know what's happening, man. We've had some internet gremlins. But to your point, Thigpen's got to play them. And Thigpen, I will say this, and this is a key point here. Carolina's averaging, 50, 60 snaps on defense, which is a far cry from the 90 they played sometimes on defense in years past. So these guys, I think the stat we had, I can't remember when it was, last year after 3 games, the 4 of the top 5 ACC defensive snap leaders were Carolina guys. This year, Power Echols is like in the top 30 or something as the most. So there are caveats with this stuff. Yes, you want to see depth play because in case somebody hurts, but it's not a situation where Aaron Crawford's playing 98 snaps in a 6 overtime game like it was back then. So they have the depth. The trick is to play them. Jason, on the defensive side, I think for me, I've seen to my points on the defensive line, and we can talk about linebackers and secondary. You can take wherever you want to go. I think this defense has shown me with the leadership of Collins that they're different in years past. I would be shocked to see a letdown that we've seen in the past, maybe, after South Carolina last year. And that's for you, Jason, in case you're here.
Yeah, so yeah, I would be surprised to see a letdown too. I mean, the thing that we've seen from this defense so far that, this has already been mentioned, that is really different is that more of those guys, especially up front, they just look like they're playing harder. They're coming off the ball with more violence. And thing about, we've talked, how many times, this is one of those, drink moments for everybody, or your bingo card checkoff. How many times have I said over the years that so much of playing good defense is just getting buy-in so that your guys play hard and play their assignments? It's about getting as many hats to the football with good angles as possible. And if you get a bunch of hats to the football, you're going to be good on defense. And a lot of guys think that a lot of coordinators act as though it's about scheme. And we're going to trick them. And it's about disguise this, do that. And that stuff is that can be valuable. But what really matters on defense is, are my guys, first of all, bought in enough that they're going to do their job so that they're not busting their assignment? So they're just executing what I'm asking them to do. And secondly, are they doing it with so much strain and effort that they're just arriving angry and, 3 or 4 guys are getting to the ball carrier at any given time and they're just chasing constantly? That relentlessness is what makes good defense. What I have seen from Jeff Collins' defense so far this year is they have bought into the idea that they, okay, you're initially blocked. Stop, don't stay blocked. Mm-hmm. Right? Okay, he got you. He's in better position than you. Well, then strain harder at this moment. It's that stuff that you're seeing a little bit more of from this team. Now, how far does that take you when the competition level raises? That's a good question. But I do think, again, effort, they talk about defense travels, you can take your defense on the road with you, this sort of thing. Effort travels. Effort matters at every level, no matter who you're playing. And we have seen, in my view, just in general, more strain, and again, specifically from the guys up front.
Yeah, that says it all there. you talking about staying blocked. I mean, how many times in the last 4 years have we seen guys just get blocked and it look like they're stuck to the offensive lineman and they just allow it? And that's some of the guys that are currently playing their butts off this year. So it tells me a lot about buy-in. It tells me a lot about hard conversations with guys that say, if you want to be where you want to be, if you want to be that 5-star recruit that goes to the NFL, you got to be that guy. And that's the buy-in we're talking about. Anything left on the defensive side? I do want to pop out some of the questions from the chat because I think there's a few relevant ones. Greg, anything left on defense?
Yeah, I think it's worth talking about James Madison, quarterback Alonzo Barnett. He's a sophomore, actually played at Grimsley a couple years ago. So he's a local kid. But he has potential to cause you some headaches. And I think he's got 122 rushing yards, averaging about 8 yards per carry. Some of that scrambles, some of that's design run plays. He's a good athlete. He kind of took over the game against Charlotte in the second half. He was really the main part of the offense that looked good. Petaway stacked up most of his yards last week against Gardner-Webb, but he had a little bit of game in the Charlotte, but it was really Barnett doing the damage. But when you look at kind of what he can do throwing the ball, I think this is telling. And I'm a big proponent of the idea of I don't care kind of what level you are. If you can perform at a high rate when you're kept clean, that says a lot. And then from there, it's a matter of how do you play under pressure, and different quarterbacks perform different ways there. But when kept clean this season, he's got an 81 grade according to Pro Football Focus. 3 big-time throws, completing 81% of his passes, adjusted completion percentage, which speaks to some of the issues with drops because they've had a lot of drops. 344 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. It's pretty good, kept clean. Under pressure is a different story. Granted, he hasn't been under pressure much, but 12 dropbacks under pressure. He's completed 1 pass for 10 yards. It's a 33.2 grade. And so I think that the challenge for North Carolina is if you put pressure on him, maybe you can force him into some bad decisions. However, if you put pressure on him and send an extra guy or two, now all of a sudden you've got an athletic quarterback who can do some damage in your backfield. And that's really the test. And so, of course, what you would prefer in that situation is to have your front four really be able to apply that pressure without having to use extra guys. That's the challenge. Or you can drop one of the ends and send a linebacker as a blitz, that type of thing. That will be really the game. And if Jeff Collins can figure out that puzzle, I think James Madison is going to have some very difficult times trying to move the ball and score.
So I'm going to build on what Greg just said. This is just some basic numbers on their offense, not just the quarterback. They, to date, now granted, they've not played against the best competition to date. These are just raw numbers. Their expected points, their EPA, right? On early downs, they're 33rd in the country. It's pretty good. On 3rd and 4th down, they're 113th. That's not as good. For what it's worth, North Carolina's early downs are 48th, and 3rd and 4th down is 23rd. And then they're really good when they run the football. Well, they're average when they run the football. 42% EPA when they run the football. Okay? Drop back passing, they're 90th. Their EPA when they just drop back without play action, that sort of thing, or without RPO, drop back passing, they're under 37%, just under 37% EPA in terms of success rate. Their success rate drop back passing is under 37%. What that tells me goes completely with what you just said about the quarterback. And that is This game, to me, comes down to, can you stop the run and have some success on first down? Because if you can get this team into third down, and you can get them into third and long situations and second and long situations where you're asking him to win without much of the threat of the run, it's going to be a hard game for them. But if they have some success running the football on early downs, and they can use him in some of the play action and RPO game and on first down, and he can stay clean and all of that, it's going to be a long day for your defense. So you got to win against the run, win on some of that stuff on early downs, and get it to where I don't believe that they can block you for 4 quarters if you get them into long yardage. But you've got to get to that. This game, to me, is all about getting that first. And you know, if you're Jeff Collins, you're rolling the dice a number of ways to try to get that TFL or that 1 yard gain on first down. You get that, you're getting them off the field more often than not.
Tommy, here's your stat for the night. Against Gardner-Webb, an FCS program, James Madison was 3 of 12 on third down. To echo Jason's point there.
Yeah. It's all about winning first and second down for Carolina's defense. They've got some skill. Like you guys said, Petaway can get after it. Almost said Alonzo Mourning. Alonzo Barrett can get after it. And they've got guys that can make you miss. Do your job. Stay in your lanes. All that stuff, and don't miss tackles in space, and Carolina can handle their business. We're going to get to the prediction portion, so as I'm doing the congruity read, I need you guys to write your score down. Greg, if you hadn't, I need you to put it down. congruityhr.com. So let's go to Matt at congruityhr.com for your free small to mid-sized business assessment. You see their logo up here on the screen. They are perfect if you've got a small to mid-sized business and you need to get it figured out so you can make lots of money. They've managed to do the local thing themselves and get into a national brand. Well, now they can do it for you. And if you're an inside Carolina person, you email Matt at congruityhr.com. Send him a note. Say, look, I need to do that assessment, and I'm an inside Carolina person. It's free. They take care of inside Carolina people. It's all about customer service, technology, and support. Matt and Darren are wonderful there, and just another great sponsor of Inside Carolina Podcast. Predictions. I don't remember who I went with first. I'm going to go Jason first this time. I think I went with Greg first last time. Jason, Carolina, James Madison, 12 o'clock. Kegs and eggs in the tailgates. ACC Network. What you got?
So, I sort of tip my hand a little bit in that I think Carolina's going to have a little bit of an edge up front, especially on passing downs in this one. And I do like Carolina's secondary to be able to handle their business against those receivers that have had a little bit of trouble. Nevertheless, I do think there's going to be some run game that they'll give up. And, I still think it's a bit of a work in progress on the offensive side, as I expect Criswell to be the guy and to probably get the whole game. If I had to guess, whatever they're saying is one thing, but that would be my guess. And I suspect he'll have some ups and downs, but play pretty well and well enough to win. All that said, I'm going to go with North Carolina 31, JMU 24 in this one.
Ooh. What's the line? 10 or 12 now?
10 and a half, I think.
So no cover. Greg Barnes, what we got?
I'm actually surprised by that a little bit, Jason.
We might actually see the Twins separate here on the Game Plan Podcast 3 weeks in, 4 weeks
one
in.
side of the equation, maybe. I had the misfortune of watching the Charlotte JMU game, and
that's research, folks.
JMU is just not the team that they were last year. They've got some decent pieces, but that is a work in progress. And that's kind of what happens when you pretty much completely turn over your roster and your coaching staff. They were 125th, according to Bill Connolly, in returning production. And as I said earlier, I think their defense is solid enough. I just don't know that they have enough pieces. And I think Carolina, I'm expecting a little bit better quarterback play with Criswell now, having a half of a game at least under his belt. And so because of that, I agree with Jason on the 31. You see that? but I've got it 14, 31-14 Carolina.
Wow. I actually had it like 31-17, but I'm going to change it up so I don't copy y'all. So if folks read Buck Sanders' column morning after, I've won it twice so far, and I'm going to win it a third time because I'm going to go Carolina 36, James Madison 21. I think Criswell.
Settle down, Bob Barker, with your game in the system here.
Yeah, I mean,
you need to write down your guesses beforehand.
Yeah, if you go over, then
I'm
you're
the
out.
host. I don't. Yeah, if I go over, I'm out. Well, I was going to say like 31-17, but I'm not going to copy y'all. So I'm at least being honest. And I don't even remember what I said. What'd I say? 33-21, 36-21.
There you go.
But just put me down for the third win of the season. Let me get to a couple questions since we're a little short of an hour, and I started some questions right fast. I sort of answered this early. Did the staff misevaluate quarterback room with the third stringer looking better than the first or second? We've explained Criswell getting to camp late, getting the rust knocked off. Talent is not automatically first team. You got to get there, and Criswell's by injury and by work has done that. Can Criswell be the guy that wins a game versus being the reason we don't lose it? That's too complicated, heel raiser. I don't. It's too late in the evening. I'll give you a second shot at how has JMU looked this year. Greg sort of answered that a little bit. This is a good question from Gene Triplehorn. Jason, is this year's D-line floor higher than last year's ceiling?
No.
But they never reached that ceiling last year.
They never even came close to it. And I do think that this year's D-line's floor is higher than it might be. It might be about the level that last year's team got to at max, like in terms of what they actually played at. Not what their ceiling was, but in terms of what the level that they played at. That's this year's defensive line's floor, and I think they've already raised that floor above the level that they played at last year.
Right. I agree with that. You agree with that, Greg?
I do.
Do y'all have any sense of who the team, OL, wide receivers, tight ends, number 24, maybe number 28, have more confidence in? Everybody has friends on teams. I think players just want to win, and if you're a receiver, you want them to throw you the ball. So I think one thing I understand with Criswell and with Harrell, they're great teammates across the board, and they're very supportive of each other, and I think the team works the same way. You always have infighting. You got 120 guys, Greg. You're always going to have some guys that have besties and all that stuff.
That's for sure. And also want to say this about the quarterback situation. Max Johnson went down in the first half at Minnesota. So, I think we need –
third quarter.
It's the third quarter? Okay.
Yeah.
So early in the second half. So we really didn't get to see what he could provide. We'll see how good Minnesota ends up being. I mean, they've looked decent thus far. And I think that's important because he's a kid that could factor into the quarterback competition again next year, should he decide to come back. We'll have to wait and see exactly what plays out with the rest of the quarterback room. But I wouldn't just kind of discount him already. He had a pretty serious injury, and fortunately he's back in Chapel Hill now. But I will say that just in talking with teams over the years, when you have a standout who has performed consistently at a national level, whether that is Sam Howell, whether that's Drake May, whether that's Marquise Williams, Elijah Hood, Ryan Switzer, Buck Howard. I mean, there's a lot of guys, and then we can do the same on the defensive side. There's trust there because those guys tend to be leaders in the locker room, and coaches appreciate them, and players see how coaches treat players. And so when you have a guy like Amarian Hampton who has been there and done that, there's a confidence level that, hey, even if things are a little bit shaky, we know we've got a rock in the backfield. And I think that's important for everybody on offense to have that in the back of their mind.
I agree with all of that. Golfer asks how you got to make Connor Harrell happy. He could leave. I mean, anybody's subject to leave with the transfer portal. It's just the nature of the beast, and that's just how it works. Can Criswell run well enough to keep defenses honest? I think he can.
Yes. Yes.
And when he runs, I don't think if Harrell runs or if a guy, even Max Johnson runs, I don't have the same injury concerns with the way Criswell runs that those other guys maybe. But the answer to that question, WH1315, yes.
Yeah, the answer to that question is an obvious yes. And you're right. He does tend to run more sort of instinctively and doesn't take, he's not taken a whole lot of shots when he has run. So he ran actually a good amount in the few appearances that he had at Arkansas. That's something that they actually did with him. He had like a 70-yarder when he was there. And it was against backups, but you could still see it. But he's a guy that you can run like quarterback power or some of that stuff with him as well between the tackles, because he does have some bulk to him and he's pretty solidly built. But he can run enough to keep defenses honest on the edge, to do all those things. He's not, Connor Harrell when it comes to taking off and running and being able to run and hide the way that Harrell can. But he is, I think, a more instinctive runner and doesn't take as many shots.
Yeah. So it's interesting take there. I mean, yeah, he runs more like a fullback / running back than a quarterback-ish. Sean Crawley in the chat, Sunrise Biscuits is the tailgate this week in the Bowls Lot. Come see us. A couple other questions. Somebody asked about punting and special teams. I think Liam Boyd proved an adequate replacement for Noah Burnett at field goals at kicking until Burnett can get back. Punting is what it is. I think it's been better than thus far this year. Just don't get them blocked in every possession on the kick, and don't let that kick be blocked. And I think you're doing well. Anything left, boys? It's been the game plan. Predictions a little bit earlier in the show than I wanted, almost an hour in. Any other thoughts? Can I get Greg Barnes to a game this year? Is that going to be possible?
Oh yeah, for sure. But I've got a question for you two. We got the Textile Bowl on Saturday, guys. Who's going to win it? Is it going to be Clemson App State or Clemson Georgia?
What you got?
It's Clemson. Clemson's winning the game.
I
am not persuaded that NC State has. I don't think they have the team that they thought they would have, and I'm not persuaded that they have the passing game to really give Clemson a lot of trouble, because you ain't running it easily on Clemson this year.
And you got a freshman quarterback, because McCall. Freshman quarterback may give you a better chance to win than Grayson McCall will down there. But
maybe. But bottom line is, I don't trust them to be able to throw well enough to beat that Clemson defense. And I don't think they are defensively what they were the last couple of years without a couple of the studs that they had on that defense.
Indeed. Last question, Jason. You got 30 seconds. Does Florida State get out of the winless hole against Cal?
I'm picking them to lose against Cal on my own on my Florida State podcast. So
Cal looks pretty good.
I think it'll be close, but Florida State hasn't been able to stop the run, and that's the one thing Cal does well. So,
boy, you're talking about flipping the league upside down.
Breaking down Florida State's offensive line in the film session that I did this week, it was ugly. And I mean, if that doesn't get fixed, and I'm not sure how easily that could get fixed in season, it's gonna get worse.
Whew. At least you got Carolina to work on. Carolina winning football games at the time.
my life is not negatively impacted by what other people do on the football field. I'm not coaching. I'm not playing. I wake up the next morning and I'm still going about business. I still just got to do my job.
Absolutely. The sun will come up regardless of how these guys play on the field Saturday. Carolina, James Madison, 12 noon. It's been the game plan. Stay tuned for Inside Carolina Live on Saturday, 9 a.m. So get on your YouTube or come see us in the Bowls Lot at 9 a.m., 9 to 11. Joey's worked out a great play. Denora Searcy joins us. Evan Rogers, as always. fun time. And we'll hear from Jason Staples again on that day. Johnny T-shirt and congruity. Greg, Jason, I'm Tommy. Appreciate everybody joining us.